All right. Hello and welcome to another special edition of the Puget Systems Podcast. There's an update edition from about a month ago when we last talked about the tariff situation. I feel like there's been quite a few changes. So today we're joined by Puget Systems President and Founder, Jon Bach, to kind of unpack all of the current U.S. tariff situation, and particularly how it's affecting computer components imported from China, because it seems to be kind of the main changes for this one. So since our last conversation, there have been some new tariffs, changes to old ones. The industry has been kind of scrambling to adapt. And I noticed on LinkedIn, you recently shared some updates to the blog post that you posted, I think it was near the end of March. And so just in the effort of being transparent and open and honest with our audience, I really think that's really cool. So today, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be breaking down what's changed since our last chat, how it's changing, PC component prices and supply chains, and what we're doing to navigate those challenges while staying true to our values. Most important, we're going to be giving you some actionable guidance, whether you're just wondering when to buy your next system, or if you're just kind of a tech enthusiast trying to make sense of what's going on. And as always, since we're live, we want to hear from you too. If you have any questions, put them there in the chat, and we will get to them as many as we can. So with that, let's get started. Jon, thanks for joining us again today. And so what's going on?
Oh man, yeah.
Before we get too much into the changes, let's give kind of a little recap of what we talked about last time.
Yeah, well, man, the hard thing is like to know where even to start. And the thing with all of this is like I'm not a tariff expert, but I am having to become an expert in how it affects our business. And so, think of this as a little bit more about, what are the impacts on the computer industry and what are we doing about it? What do we recommend people do about it? And everything I say about the tariffs themselves, like fact check all that stuff, because I'm just doing my best trying to decipher this. Okay. So, start with where we were at, what we talked about last time. That was a month ago.
Just about.
Well, what kind of kicked it off was a few things. Like we had seen there was already a lot of tariff type of things going on. And we had seen how that was going to accelerate through what we believed was June 1st, which is still true, by the way. And then it was April 2nd, right? April 2nd happened, and all these reciprocal tariffs just made everything explode all at once. And it wasn't just the reciprocal tariffs, but it was the fact that it changed daily, hourly, who knows when. It just added uncertainty, and we can plan our business around any particular tariff or tax scheme, but planning a business around one that changes daily is really almost not possible. A lot of what happens in the computer industry takes 3 months to execute, and we have to buy products sometimes at a year scale, and we have to forecast what our demand will be at a year scale. And so, anyway, I'm complaining now is all that it was hard. It was hard. So we put out a blog post to put a little bit more transparency around. Well, part of it was put transparency around what's going on because we had to put in the work to try to figure it out. And even if we're not the experts on it, at least we could boil it down into here's what we're seeing that is the net effect on the computer industry. But then also put some transparency around what are we doing about it I think that transparency helps us all be on the same team. It isn't evil companies try to get profits from consumers. It's, hey, we all want technology in people's hands and we have to make a living doing it. And how is that going to work in this situation? Sure. So put out that blog post, and the general premise behind our internal approach is, we set the price based on whatever the cost is to us. And then let the market decide whether that's worth it. And, I think clearly at a tariff level of like 20%, maybe even 40% on some things, computers get more expensive, but life goes on. 145%? I don't know. So part of our strategy is that when the tariffs are going up and down and sideways and who knows what, that it's almost like buying the dips in the market. Sure. When it's a day, that's a good day. We buy inventory to get through the hard days. And it's challenging for us to set, how do we set our pricing in that scheme? You still got me?
Uh-oh. No, it looks like maybe your video cut out.
Oh, I see myself.
I see myself.
I'm back.
That was strange. There.
Appropriately sized.
Strange.
Anyway, where was I going with that? So we purchased a bunch of inventory, and that helps us keep things going. And that's kind of just where we're at now, honestly. Is I think we've done actually a pretty good job now that I can look 30 days in the rearview mirror.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to honor customer pricing. We have updated our pricing multiple times, and the pricing has been either stable or has in some instances calmed down. So
Okay.
I think, I'm still really cautious. There was a while, frankly, up until even a couple days ago, where I was saying we're in the eye of the hurricane. The weather's fine and it's sunny out, but we're only halfway through this storm. I still think that's somewhat true. However, there are signs of positive progression. The fact that we're not at 145% or something with China is good, but we are still at big numbers, and the numbers are going to get bigger. So maybe we should talk about that, because those are the updates since we talked last.
Yeah. So I was going to say, so where do things stand now? There were some exemptions on certain parts last time we talked. Has that changed? And then you also mentioned previously and just a moment ago about there was some breath holding in terms of June, and so I guess I kind of covered.
Yeah. Well, I think so. I think we should talk about two things. We should talk about what's the latest news on the reciprocal tariffs, because for the last month that has been the primary chaos.
Yeah.
As that subsides on this chaos scale, the next thing we need to talk about is, all right, not just reciprocal tariffs, all the tariffs. What are they adding up to be in totality?
Sure.
So let's have both those conversations. And Frank, yes, anyone on the chat, if you want to ask questions, this is totally, let's figure it out together. So I'm happy to go wherever y'all want to go with this. So the reciprocal tariffs are looking like they're subsiding. We had all the different countries that were starting at like 25, 35, 40%, and they all got reduced down to 10%. Okay. And, I don't know if that's the administration's strategy, but the net effect was we're all very happy. Well, I don't know if happy. We're much happier at 10% than we were at 40. And so let's take that. But that's where we're at, except for China. And so China did this whole escalation thing and got up to a really big number, over 100%. And that's where we sat for a little bit. We sat there for maybe even a couple of weeks. Then exemptions came out saying all these sorts of computer electronics are exempt from all these reciprocal taxes. And that was great. It basically took all this a little bit off the table. But hang on. Am I mixing total things? I am mixing total things. We had the reciprocal tariffs in many countries go down to 10%, but that was a 90-day pause. Although it said something like at least 90 days. So like there was a number 90 in there, but nobody knew really what it meant. But we're keeping an eye on that date because that's a date where something might happen. So that's one piece. And then we had these computer exemptions come in that exempted a lot of things in the computer industry, but not everything. And those don't have that 90-day expiration date. So those are who knows how long. However, they could leave as quick as they came. Like I might wake up to a post on x.com that tells me that it's gone. But still, there's a little bit more certainty there. Okay, those exemptions functionally took care of most of the computer industry. The biggest category it didn't take care of is power supplies.
Right.
There were some other things in there too, fans, air coolers, but thankfully, like in the totality of your $8,000 workstation, if there's a big old tariff on your $20 of fans, no big deal. So functionally, it was power supplies was the biggest thing that was like the pain point. And it just so happens that our power supplies that we purchase come from China. So it would, that just the power supplies would be 2.5 times more expensive. Just it challenging.
To say the least. Yeah, challenging.
Yeah. And so thankfully, that was a relationship where we could do big purchases, big stock up. And so that's exactly what we did, mostly to like, can we just get a little time to breathe to see how all this pans out? And that was basically a strategy, was like, hold our breath as long as we can hold our breath. Mm-hmm. And so thankfully then it was only last week that made progress with China as well. And so now that plus 100% tariff level is down to the same 10% as other countries. I think what I'm saying is right. And that's good, obviously. We still have the it sure would be nice if power supplies were in those exemptions. Like that's probably the biggest thing that's painful at this point. And that's where we're sitting right now. And so we can tolerate, the world can tolerate, the computer industry can tolerate a 10% reciprocal tariff on all these countries.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still under this looming rain cloud of what's going to happen in 60 days. So we're about 1/3 of the way through that 90-day pause.
Okay.
So we're keeping an eye on that date. So let me kind of pause and take a breath there. That's just the reciprocal tariffs.
Okay.
To some extent, it doesn't even matter what journey we've been on, just to say that we're basically at 10% now, and power supplies are the biggest thing that are affected by that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, okay, let me go down one more rabbit hole just a little bit.
Sure.
The challenge is not just what are the tariffs, but all the uncertainty around the tariffs has led the entirety of the supply chain to do all sorts of, I'd call it, I want to say wacky things, but it's not even wacky things. It's they're just trying to do what they need to do to survive / make sure they don't lose their shirts. And that's really impactful on creating shortages and hoarding, and one geography having a huge stockpile of inventory and another geography not, or stuff that was coming into the US that got diverted to Mexico or Canada, and they're sitting there in these big Indiana Jones warehouses full of stuff. And it's just the industry, we saw this through COVID, the industry cannot survive or cannot do well under that amount of just disruption to the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so the impact it has on the price and availability of components is at this point even more harmful than the tariffs themselves. So again, the world can say, hey, if you just tell us 10% on things, we can all make a plan and we can do that. We can build factories and but you have to leave it that way for a long time.
Right.
You can't just move a factory quickly. And you don't want to move a factory unless you have faith that it is going to be a stable situation.
Sure. Yeah.
So, that's more what we're dealing with at this point. And thankfully, the answer to all of those problems is the same answer, which is make sure we have really good supply chain relationships, make sure we do good forecasting, and make sure we have a good amount of inventory.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's too bad. It doesn't need to be that way. and we're all paying for it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So just to recap, we still have 10% everywhere, but then the recent news is 30% on China. Is that on top of that blanket 10%? And does that still, does that 30% is the parts that were exempted before, are those exempted from that 30%? Or
they're exempted in different ways. Okay, so let's zoom out now.
Okay.
You're testing my ability to regurgitate what I've been researched and told.
Sure.
Okay. That what we've talked about up to this point was just reciprocal tariffs, but we got to zoom out because the tariff situation really started escalating in 2018, 2019. That's called the Section 301 tariffs.
Okay.
Now at that point, that's on China, and that was a 45% Section 301. And then in it was I can't remember when it was, but then computer components very specifically got exempted from a portion of that. So computer components have been sitting at, since 2018, 2019, at this more 20% rate.
Okay.
And let's just have that sit there for a minute. That's one thing. Then there's, I don't even know what the code name of this tax is, but it's the phrase for it is a fentanyl tax.
Sure.
And that's on items from China. That's another 20%. So now we're at 20, now we're at 40.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the reciprocal tariffs. There's another 10, so now we're at 50. And then you have a smaller effect on raw materials like metals, aluminum and steel and something else. But that's a big deal to the heat sink manufacturers. They're really impacted by that. Chassis manufacturers to some extent. But look at what is the cost of aluminum on your video card? I don't know. I don't care because it's a couple dollars.
Yeah.
So, I typically don't spend a lot of time worrying about the aluminum type taxes. So, I think that's the short version, unless I forgot something of the different pieces. So you got the Section 301 tariffs, you have the fentanyl tariff on all products from China, and then you have the reciprocal. And of those three, the next chaos, maybe, is going to be the Section 301s, where all those computer exemptions that brought it from 45 down to 20, those are, by my understanding, I haven't heard a lot of people getting excited about this, but by my understanding, that those exclusions expire on May 31st.
Okay.
And under, this has been true, that there's been exclusions that will expire since all the way back at 2018. But what's happened throughout every time we hit one of those waypoints is at the 11th hour, somebody comes to the rescue and says, good news, it's been deferred. And it goes off into some point in the future. And if governments were predictable, then I would say totally that's what they're going to do again. May 31st at 10 p.m., you'll hear about an extension. I don't know what normal is anymore, so I don't know what to expect. So in some ways, we got to plan for that not being the case. And that will mean another 25% on a lot of computer components coming from China, I think. And I think where that is going to have the biggest impact is on GPUs, because GPUs and accelerators are specifically named as excluded from a portion of those Section 301 tariffs.
Okay.
So all that to say is that something bad might be coming on June 1, and we can hold our breath that there'll be another deferral to those exclusions. But let's prepare for the worst, and that would be another 25% on GPUs.
Wow. Oh man. Okay. So I guess just for clarity's sake, because there was quite a few different things mentioned. Which specific components are being hit the hardest by this? Or I suppose maybe just as specific as we can get, I suppose.
We talking about the June 1 or just in general?
As it stands right now.
As it stands right now, in the totality for everything, by far the number one impacted thing is power supplies.
Okay.
Now, thankfully, power supplies aren't generally like the most expensive part of a computer. It still definitely hurts.
Sure.
But it hurts to the tune of a couple $100s. So power supplies today are for sure like the most sharp pain point.
Okay.
But I think the more fuzzy but also bigger dollar amount item is going to be consumer class GPUs, 5090s, 5080s, in AMD Radeons, Intel Arcs. Those are the ones that have both the most opportunity for, the supply chain is just complicated with those things. There's all these different bits. And so there's just more chance for it doesn't even matter what the tariffs are. The complication of the situation is inflating pricing in a landscape like we're already seeing, like whether it's AI or crypto or whatever. GPUs have always been this who actually pays MSRP anymore? Type of problem. And so it could even be predatory of people are just taking this chance to jack up the prices. But that's definitely I have it listed under still assessing impacts, because we don't actually know what the final destination on tariff is going to be. But also it's more all the social dynamics of the supply chain that's probably just as impactful. Not to mention the fact that these consumer cards come from all over the place in terms of where they're manufactured is so varied. So yeah, power supplies, kind of painful, but it's a very known pain. Video cards, specifically consumer video cards, very painful, but it's still fuzzing. We don't know where we're going to end up yet.
Okay, yeah. And so I imagine that some of the less painful would extend to CPUs and RAM SSDs, because I think a lot of that is made in Vietnam and Taiwan and things like that, right?
Yeah, yes. Thankfully, CPUs and memory and SSDs are the least impacted by this, and probably that's nice. The best news of the entirety of the tariff conversation is thankfully they're not touching our CPUs. Memory and SSDs are a little bit more complicated because they're already such a pricing volatile component.
Sure.
That they're never stable in price. And so that introduces a little bit more fuzziness here as well. Yeah. The thing to remember about both memory, SSDs, and processors are kind of the same. is you have like the big old fabs, they're actually making the wafers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like TSMC in Taiwan, or there's a fair number of fabs here in the US as well. And then those wafers go to somewhere, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Indonesia, and then those get packaged, not packaged like cardboard package, but packaged onto PCBs where you put the cache and the cores and all that down on the PCB. And then, you put it in a box too. And then that comes to the US. So that's, the country of origin, I think, would actually be Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore. So one of the reasons why they're not as impacted by all this tariff stuff.
Oh, okay. Nice. Man, I have to say, it's things like this that I think people don't often get to hear about when it comes to business, and it's always surprising to me the things that you have to navigate as the boss.
Yeah, I just want to build computers,
right?
Yeah, but I was reflecting on this the other day that if you were to rewind 20 years when we were just 4 years old as a company, I probably wouldn't even like watched the news or maybe even known about any of this stuff. I would just see like, oh, the price is going up on things. And you know what? To some extent, that's kind of okay. You just, your price, you set your price, you pass it along to the consumer, and you let the whole like supply and demand stuff work out. I think the biggest opportunity, like at least I have to tell myself this at night, is with the burden of the knowledge and the stress that comes along with that, we can make better decisions as a company, which does help us perform better as a company, but it helps us provide a more stable service to our customers.
Sure.
So, the tragic thing is, and I'll share this freely, we're doing great in terms of like how much business we have going on and how many computers we're selling. I think part of the reason why is because we are providing that stability at a time where, holy crap, people just want a computer. They have an engineer starting tomorrow. They have to have a computer, and somebody has to provide that to them. That's the same thing with COVID. Like during COVID, it was a super stressful time when we did really well. And I believe it's because, through that stress and planning, we did provide a stability to people. I don't wish for that to be true. Like I'd rather that we do a good job selling computers because they're actually good computers.
Right.
But these days it seems to be just as challenging to navigate how to do business as it is how to build a computer.
That's a really good point. You've been really transparent that we're not just like passing on these increased costs or using it as an excuse to pad margins and things. So I'd like you to kind of reiterate some of our strategy and the commitment that we have toward not just a customer, but all the way back through the supply chain.
Yeah. I mean, the premise is pretty simple. One is our first responsibility is to our customers to give them stability. Like we quoted a price, we need to honor that price. Now there's a limit to how far we can do that, and
Sure.
we have limits on that. But that's like one of our first guiding principles, especially when we're working with big organizations or universities or government facilities where they're saying it might take them 90 days just to get through all the red tape on their side to make a purchase.
Yeah.
And how terrible would it be to work for 90 days to get it, finally your boss's boss signs this thing and you can buy a computer. And then we say, oh, we can't honor that price anymore. So absolutely not. I mean, there might be a situation where we have to do that, but we do everything we can to make that not be true. And thankfully, I'll tell you, going back, looking back 30 days now, I think we've done great on that. I'm sure that we've had pain points here and there, but I have not heard of anything where like, we're not honoring our commitments from a pricing standpoint. Now, one of the ways that we fund that, because we're eating stuff, like we're eating cost. One of the ways that we fund that is buying the dips.
Sure.
Anytime that we have a particularly good price on something, we bring in as much as we can, and we don't necessarily lower our price to the customers because we made that one really good purchasing decision. We let the customer price be based on what our like baseline average cost is. Okay. And so we let our purchasing power be that economic engine behind the places where we have to take a bath because we're honoring a commitment on a price. And does the math work out? Honestly, I don't know. Conceptually, I like the way that it works, and I'll tell you, when you zoom out and look at our business from a month scale, we're doing fine. So it must be okay.
Nice. That's good. Yeah.
Right. But those are the guiding principles of like honor our price and use purchasing power to fund that by making good purchases when we can.
Okay. I guess now let's move on to practical guidance for the listeners, customers, and just kind of in general, people, the enthusiasts out there and things like that. A lot of people are planning on a new build or budgeting for, like you said, 90 days. They got to plan ahead. So how do they make a smart decision in light of all of this? What advice do you have?
I think at this point, the dust has settled enough that when you go out to the market, whether it's Puget or anyone else, and you look at their price, that you can have a reasonable expectation that that price will be the same tomorrow. So I think we can consider ourselves out of the fear, uncertainty, doubt part of like, you got to buy now because maybe it'll be gone tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Except for the June 1st thing.
Yeah.
So I think I would say watch the news on June 1st.
Okay.
I'm still a little bit alarmed that I haven't heard this in our like circles and the computer industry. Why? It feels like I'm the only one talking about it. I don't know if that's true or I'm just not listening. But hopefully that means I'm wrong. And hopefully it means on June 1, it's like business as usual, just keep going. So in that case, the next thing to look for is 1 month after that, or about 6 weeks after that, when this like 90-day pause thing potentially comes to an end, but like something will happen.
Okay.
And hopefully it's nothing, but those are definitely, of the 2 weeks where you should watch the news, it'd be those 2 weeks. But in the meantime, yeah, I'd say a little bit of business as usual. If you feel like you need a new computer, now could be a good time. Prices are elevated, but they're probably elevated to the tune of like 10% or something in that range. Like it's not like a deal killing level. And then the other things going on is also Computex is this week. That's when a lot of announcements tend to happen. I'm not expecting anything in the consumer segment. Well, maybe like new variants in the mid range, or like now there's a card with this amount of memory, that type of thing. But nothing like at CES where it's like now there's 5090s, or at at GTC where it's now the Blackwell Pro video cards. Like those are big like industry shaking events where people think about, should I think about a new computer now that there's this new technology? The technology launch schedule is also fairly stable. So I think it's a pretty decent time to just like level-headedly decide, is this a new time for a computer? But don't let fear of what's going to happen tomorrow be a big piece of that.
Nice. Oh, okay, good. Thank you. All right. And I want to grab this question from LinkedIn from Emmanuel. They ask, with all these uncertainties, has this affected your plans to expand into other regions?
We already were affected in our plans to spread to other regions. So, okay, just a little context to it. Going back like 10 years, going back even further. We are a U.S. company that primarily sells to the United States. So there's no like international exports or imports that come along with that. And we had expanded a number of years ago into like Canada, Mexico, UK, Australia, and then we pulled back from that. And we pulled back from it. This was maybe like 2016, something like that. We pulled back from that for two reasons. One, the amount of business we had going on in those other geographies was very small compared to what we had in the US. And it was taking a disproportionately large amount of effort and energy to do those things, which was being pulled from our other work. It's an unfortunate reality, but like our quality of computers go down when we have to spend time and energy on too many things. So it's a question of like focus. But also, it's not just, can we logistically get something to another country? Like once we do, what's our tech support like?
Right.
What's our warranty process like? Like everything is just worse because the hours don't line up, and shipping something from Australia to here for a warranty fulfillment, like I think we can all intuitively know that that's not going to be as easy as here in the US. And so we pulled out of that, but then expanded back into it in the last 2 years. A little bit. Yeah, but this is more like, okay, one geo at a time. So we expanded into Canada. Mm-hmm. Canada, I mean, it's easy. It's like 2 hours away. We could drive up there. Also, for the business or the industries that we service, a lot of like visual effects companies and post-production houses, that type of thing. There's a whole lot of that going on in Canada, and like game dev in like Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver. And so we expanded to Canada, and we're just, we're probably like 60% of the way through becoming mature in those processes. We're still having lots of tax problems and still lots of like, if we need to ship this computer across the border for a warranty reason, do we actually get tax exemption because there's not actually like revenue transfer happening? Yeah, it's not a sale happening. And so overall, my attitude is let's get Canada solid on lockdown, and then let's talk about the next place, and then the next place, and the next place. And there's certainly places. There's some places that are really interesting. Saudi Arabia. A lot of investments going in there from a tech standpoint. A lot of this is fueled by, where is energy, where is AI boom happening? And so there's tech investments going in all over the world. But, clearly a lot of like research happening in Europe. There's some pockets of like virtual production vibrancy that are happening in like Singapore and those areas of the world. And then Australia would be nice as well. So I think that's where we're heading back towards. Now, okay, does this affect our... I think the answer is honestly no. Like, it was already difficult. It's still difficult. There are ways we could become more fancy, and I'll admit I entertained it for a moment. Like not easy. It wouldn't be easy. It is possible for us to drive a couple hours north and open up a branch in British Columbia, and then import product into there and sell to Canada from there, and just be a complete Canadian arm of the business that takes all this tariff stuff out of that equation, but only that equation. But again, time and focus. One company's enough to run.
Sure. Yeah.
Never say never, but not today.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We had some positive comments about on Twitch from some viewers saying, one day we'll own one of the workstations, and just want to say thanks for the support. But otherwise, I think that's a great place to wrap up. We covered all the quick updates for what's changing and what's coming up ahead. So thanks, Jon, for joining us again and keeping everybody updated on this chaos. I appreciate that it's not just like the numbers. We don't just like I said before, we're not just charging everybody more because we're having to pay more. There's a balance to that, and I appreciate that you are so open and transparent about it. When there's a lot of secrecy in the tech industry in general, the people tend not to talk about what goes on behind the scenes. So I think that's really, really cool of you to do this.
I do think that the industry in general has been more open about this, and frankly, I think it's necessary. But yeah, if you don't mind, here, maybe I'll let you put in chat. If you want to put in chat the blog post, because that's a good like one-stop shop for what's the latest. So I updated it just last night. Frankly, like this stream was helpful because I had to do my homework to be ready, and then if I do my homework, I might as well update the blog post. So I updated the blog post last night, and I think it's time to talk about more than just the reciprocal tariffs. And so my next update on the blog post is going to be more of the second conversation we had about what are the totality of all the tariffs when they add up. Sure. And so I'll be updating it to talk about that, but I'm specifically waiting for June 1 because it's close enough to now, and something will happen. So I'll update it then. So yeah, check back on like June 2nd, and we'll see what the new reality is then.
Wow. Oh, okay. And I always like to thank the audience as well for being a part of this, for joining us. Thank you for the questions, and I hope this was interesting and helpful for everybody. We're all in this together. If things change, I imagine there'll be an update after June 1st. So we'll probably do another live stream to talk about that. Stay tuned for that. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're on YouTube. Follow us on Twitch, and sign up for our newsletter as well so that you can get these updates as they get published. I'll have a link for that after the show. And so again, thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Great. Thank you. See you later.